Hi everybody, my name is Anders. Everybody say hi, Anders.
Hi, Anders.
I'm here to talk to you today about inkjet printers. So first of all, I want everybody to pass these pieces of paper around and look with this magnifying glass and see what you see. So hopefully what I want you to see is some little dots. You can see up here on the screen that they're little tiny dots that make up the ink on the page, all the different colors. So before you hand visitors things to look at for tiny dots, check yourself. Some newspapers, the comics no longer actually have visible tiny dots. The printing is so good. Those dots are really, really tiny. You can see an inkjet printer like this one has a thing that goes back and forth, and it's got little things that squirt out really tiny dots. Those dots are so tiny they're picoliter sized dots. So a 2-liter bottle, like up here, that's 2 liters. A picoliter is a trillionth of a liter. So 2-liter bottle has 2 trillion picoliter sized dots. So how small is a picoliter? Well, this is colored water here. Food coloring makes the water a lot easier to see. You can see there's a drop of water. 1 drop of water has 1 billion red blood cells in it. A picoliter, well, 1 drop of blood has 1 billion red blood cells in it. A picoliter of blood has 100 red blood cells in it. So these are really tiny drops of water. The thing is that when water or ink or blood gets tiny, it acts really different. So I've got a big tube. When I put it in the water just pours right out of it. It's a little wet, but it comes right out. When I take this really tiny tube and put that in the water comes up the tube and sticks to the side, and it doesn't come out. This is because of surface tension. Water is sticky. Just like that bug up there on the screen walking on top of the water, water has surface tension and can hold itself together. When you're trying to get the water to stay in the jar with the screen, making sure to keep it exactly level and not at an angle will make it work easier. Also, my screen I didn't cut, it's a pretty loose fit, and so there's stronger parts of the screen that the toothpick disturbs less, and weaker parts that the toothpick causes a lot of a problem. Practice this trick a lot. And so there's a wire mesh on this jar, and that's why the water doesn't come out. I just took some window screen, and I can even take this toothpick, and when the water doesn't come out, I can put it through the screen without the water getting out. Well, as we'll see in a second, they have special nozzles on the cartridges that use a special trick to make the ink come out. And every time you buy a new cartridge, you're buying a new nozzle as well. And if you refill a cartridge too many times, the nozzle won't work anymore. This is not a model of those nozzles though. One last try. I did get a little water to stay in before. So, water, wire screen, tiny holes. When water is small, it acts different, like that. And now I'm going to push my luck and stick a toothpick in, and it floats to the top. So when water gets really small, it acts really weird. And so to get the water to come out of an inkjet printer, what they do is they take a tiny tube and the ink just goes along it. And then what they do is they boil it. And the ink bubbles and explodes onto the paper. This is fire. Don't burn yourself. So now I need a volunteer. Hi, Blair. If you could hold this piece of paper right like that. And if anybody else wants to get close, this is pretty small.
You want it up in front of the camera?
I'm going to do close-ups later.
Okay.
For the camera. Come on. There we go. I'm going to heat this ink up so that it boils, and then a bubble will form and it'll explode onto the piece of paper. When you're making the tiny explosion tube, you can't see this. When you're making the explosion come out of the tube, there's 2 ends to the tube. So the ink is going to shoot out of both ends. So don't point it at the audience and have a piece of paper in front of it. Point it side to side so that when it explodes, it doesn't get the audience and it doesn't get you. Just in case, you should use washable food coloring or washable ink when you do it. Then you hold it next to a piece of paper that's held like this, that a volunteer is showing, and then you boil it just a little ways out from the piece of paper so that it shoots onto the piece of paper. Ink. Ink in the tube. Uh-oh, now I have to light it again. Ink. Explodes onto the paper. And an inkjet printer does that 6,000 times a second. It has little tiny heaters behind the ink a second. I've got one right here. It's got a row of little dots that it can all squirt out ink 6,000 times a second. And if I set my piece of paper down, I can print something.
Cool.
Every time I press the button, it shoots out little drops. And if I just hold it in place, it'll just squirt the dots onto the paper. But because it moves across the paper as it squirts the dots make words and pictures and whatever we want to print out. With this inkjet printer, the ink is really messy, and when it gets on your hands, it can stain you. Make sure to turn it off when you're done with it so that you don't use up the batteries. And like you pointed out, when you replace the inkjet cartridge in your printer, you're replacing the whole container full of ink, but there's also the nozzles on the front, which have the heaters inside. So all this wiring, you're replacing a whole printer. And so that's part of why it costs so much. And also why you can refill it, because the nozzles wear out slower than the ink gets used up.
How is it printed in patterns?
So there's a whole row of little dots in here, which you might be able to see with a magnifying glass. You can grab that and take a look. So there's a whole row of nozzles. And so the different nozzles fire in different patterns to make the words.
Is that why there's really tiny dots?
Yep, that's why you can see the stripes in the different words, because they're made of individual dots. If I go fast enough, you can really see the individual dots that make up the words.
So I would imagine that the way those things wear out is the thermal.
So the little heaters eventually wear out.
Yeah.
So it's the piece themselves just heat up, and then the liquid in the tube boils. The tube, it probably does expand and contract a little bit, but that's not how it works.
But thermal, metal
Yeah.
speed, yeah, from that 6,000 times a second.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'll do it.
super fast boiling.
Do you have special ink for that contraption, or?
So this contraption uses a standard Hewlett-Packard ink cartridge. The ink cartridge actually comes in a box, and the expiration date was printed with this kind of cartridge.
There's blue and purple on this thing.
Right. It takes 4 different colors to print. There's a blue, a pink, a yellow, and a black.